Well, welcome back, day 2 of the CentreCourt MBA Festival, and with thousands of registrations. Clearly, demand for business school wasn't just a year-long attachment to the pandemic, and that's a question that I'll be putting to today's panelists with my co-host, John Byrne from Poets and Quants. John will be waking up at a leisurely time on the West Coast to sit down with the gatekeepers and the careers makers of Berkeley, Haas, Michigan, Ross, UCLA, Anderson, a great bunch of schools that will be joining us later in the day. But at this time of day, we're very much in a mid-European time zone. The cafes of Paris are open, but we hope that you're actually in front of a screen and joining us, whether it's on Zoom or on the Poets homepage. Of course, if you're with us on Zoom, that gives you the opportunity, once we've asked all of our admissions questions to our panels, to actually then connect with them and perhaps share your personal stories and questions that you have. And it's a great panel to begin with. I'm delighted to welcome back Stephanie Kluth. Stephanie is the head of admissions at ESMT Berlin. Stephanie, lovely to have you with us again.
I'm happy to be with you. Thank you.
And Chris Healy, who normally has a busy schedule of weddings through most of the spring and summer, but I guess a Wednesday afternoon isn't an obvious time to have a wedding. Chris is the head of MBA recruitment and marketing at the Alliance Manchester Business School. I was a little bit nervous you were going to take that executive director role for the Elite Super League, but that didn't turn out then.
I should also add, these are not my weddings.
Yes, that's true. And the third gentleman, I'm not sure, I think you actually confused the timeshare in Ibiza workshop. That's next Wednesday, but no, it's always lovely to have David Simpson with us. David is the admissions director at London Business School, who brings that brilliant lemon pie wallpaper to our CentreCourt festivals. I talked about what economically has been one of the shortest recessions, but of course we've all felt it in terms of its social impact and small steps as the world recovers. Traditionally, with an economic downturn, soaring demand for business school, arguably there's always a good time to go to one of the world-class business schools. But Stephanie, with Germany bouncing back, the DAX was at record levels yesterday morning. What have you seen in the last sort of 6 months, and what that indicates for the January intake of your MBA program in Berlin?
Exactly. That is something I wanted to emphasize, that our intake is starting in January. So we're currently recruiting for the January 2022. And yeah, it's quite busy. I'm really astonished that the application pipeline is extremely strong. So, I mean, okay, there was COVID and there were a lot of deferrals. Not everyone we could have joined us last year did join us. So that is also a very good thing. I think that makes the pipeline this year even stronger also. And what I could also see is that we receive quite an interest from the USA, which is of course on the up in the past anyhow, but to me it was a bit astonishing, but I'm very happy to see that. I'm not complaining, the opposite. So yeah, I'm expecting, perhaps if all goes well, a slightly stronger class than we had in the past.
Right. So I mean, in terms of that strong demand for the program and double-digit growth, you talked about the US market. Are there certain markets that you felt had been sort of quieter in recent years that are now really coming back strongly?
It would be the US, I would definitely say. And otherwise, yeah, you might perhaps say that I think in the current class, we do have Western Europe a bit more on the map. But yeah, I think it's too early to talk about trends or anything. I think it can change any time, and next year it might be totally different. Yeah.
Right. Now, of course, we'll be hearing a lot about Manchester in the coming weeks, given that 2 of our teams have made their way into respective European finals. We mustn't count our chickens too soon, Chris. But in terms of the school, I mean, you've got a range of programs, the Global MBA. You're also one of the sort of world leaders in online delivery, and I'm sure that's been of great value to the school and to students over the last year. What have you been seeing at Manchester?
Yeah, so good points about our global online MBA, because Absolutely, we've seen significant growth there. Looking back at our last intake on that program, we recruited the highest amount of students for over 10 years. And I guess, that makes sense. A lot of people were at home, you couldn't travel, made sense to start a professional MBA. Many of them were starting online MBAs. I think I read the stats a few months ago on Poets and Quants actually about US online MBAs, in how there was 153 years ago, it's now grown over 300 in that time frame. So yes, we've seen that on our professional or online global MBA program. With regards to the full-time MBA, it's interesting because what we saw, and I think many other schools also, many of my other colleagues saw it as well, was a huge growth in applications last year. So if I look at our numbers around this time last year, we were about 50% up on 2019, 2018, 2017, etc. Pleased to say that we've managed to maintain that application level. So I think we're something like 2-3% up at the moment on last year. But again, if you're comparing that to 2019, 2018, etc., so that signifies continued strong demand on full-time MBA programs. And it's, with the pandemic or without a pandemic, I think there's still that issue with, the amount of choice for professional MBA programs now is at the highest it's ever been, whether it's a traditional executive MBA, whether it's a fully online MBA. So there's more and more reasons why people may choose to look elsewhere other than a full-time MBA program. But from our perspective, it's great to see those strong full-time MBA applications that we're sustaining that.
Right, it's always a bit daunting to keep the boss happy when you've had record years of consecutive years of growth. I think, how do we top it this year? And yet here you are. David, you've often described yourself as cautious by nature. I remember at the CentreCourt festival last October, you needed an extra week to be able to respond and send out all of the invitations to round one applications. And then in February, similarly, very strong numbers for round two. You're now done. Round four was just a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure you're still in that final reading period, but has it been a record year for London Business School?
Yeah, it's another great year. I mean, it's an interesting year in terms of patterns and the trends. We are a little up on last year, which is nice to see, but a very different structure of the year. So we're incredibly busy first round, second round, and much quieter in third and fourth round. The overall total is higher than last year, and that even includes all the late applications from last year. Last year, crazy, ridiculous, quirky year for admissions, where I think all of us probably opened our doors a little later and allowed people to apply without GMAT and then get it later, etc. So it was complicated. This year, more straightforward, but busier earlier. So very pleased with it so far. Some differences, like I say, in flow of applications, quality good, individually, some great people, more in line with a couple of years ago in terms of that pattern, but with a larger number. We'll see for next year, but I'm happy with the year so far. It's not done yet, Matt. We had a round 4 decision deadline last night or yesterday. Did it midday instead of in the evening, which is a bit of a record, but we still have a couple more to go. There's another deadline next week, but it's all fun.
Right. Well, of course, you get to look fresh the day after those deadlines because you haven't started reading yet. It's the candidates that are washed out after, desperately getting the finalized application to you on time. Perhaps just one follow-up. Some of the US schools had commented with, progress that all of you have made around stronger gender balance over the last 10, 12 years. And historically, economic downturns had often seen perhaps some of the female applicants opt out of applying to business school. Just from the LBS perspective, are those gender numbers still very strong?
They're good, yeah. We're working very hard for them. I think we're putting our money where our mouth is in terms of scholarships and telling stories in a very powerful Women in Business club. But it's still tough. If you're a global business school, you're attracting women from all over the world as compared to just one market, which might be have a very healthy gender balance. We're happy, we could be happier, so we never give up, we never stop working, and I predict that will continue to progress over the next years as we can try and attract even more scholarships. But I think like most subsections of the MBA market, there's intense competition. We're all trying to do the same things, trying to achieve the same things in terms of diversity initiatives, and whether you're a European school or a US school with much deeper pockets, it's a very competitive market, but we're doing pretty well. I'm pretty pleased with the results. It's a great place to be. I think London helps with that, but you need to be continuing on an upward trajectory. You know, we need to be up there with the top 1 or 2 US schools. However different our challenges are, that's what we're aspiring to.
Right. Stephanie, on that beautiful campus of yours in the heart of Berlin, and museums and, you know, sort of the cultural center of the city, the team has worked incredibly hard to ensure over the last year, you know, the ability for students to come in, obviously all of the necessary social distancing. Perhaps as you look at the January 22 entry, and the hope, of course, that will bring everybody back onto the campus. Let's be quietly optimistic about making those small steps. But you talked about deferrals, and perhaps, you know, some people that had thought, well, you know, I want that full experience, you know, sort of the interaction with my classmates, with faculty. So do you see the coming year or two, you know, remaining very, very busy for the business school?
Yeah, I absolutely do so. And yeah, it's a yes.
Right. Is that Chris was talking about how that applies across so many different options, and, you know, yourselves, you have an executive MBA, you recently launched a master's in management 2-3 years ago. Do you find that, you know, different categories, thinking at this stage of my career, you know, we've been through a pandemic, there's been a lockdown, and perhaps a mirror that we've held up to ourselves about what we really want, a sense of purpose, and how that's reflected in the sort of conversations that you and your team are having with applicants?
So the question is exactly, sorry.
Just as people have reflected in the last year about what they really want in life, have you felt that in the discussions you've had with applicants?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get that immediately. Whew, that is a very good question. But yeah, I think that especially now that we do have various kinds of programs, that people do really think about what kind of program is best tailored to them to help them to further develop. And people really think about, is it a part-time program? We have a part-time blended program, right? So we do have an online program now where we all receive a lot of other questions. People really think about in how far they can implement it into their family life, into their personal career development plans. I really do think that people do also think, because of the COVID pandemic, that now is the time to invest in more learning, and they explore alternative avenues in how that can be done next to family, friends, work. Yeah.
Right. Chris, I mean, it's always a good time to invest in yourself, you know, irrespective of sort of economic conditions and the situation. Have you felt that as people have perhaps been remote working, that's changed, you know, their thoughts about the way that they would want to engage with a business school? You know, you're talking about tremendous demand for the online MBA. So has the last 12 months been a sort of an accelerator in their thinking of the sort of study experience they're looking for?
Yeah, very good point there, Matt. And I think, you know, everyone's got their own individual story. And over the past 12 months, you've just seen so many more people. I think what the pandemic has done is it's almost expedited their thoughts in terms of business education and investing in their futures. Now, of course, whether that be an online MBA, executive MBA, full-time MBA, everyone's got their own stories, and you just have to think, okay, I'm a big believer, and I've always said this, timing is absolutely key for someone to do an MBA. Just because you meet the entry requirements of London Business School or ESMT Berlin or Manchester, you know, that doesn't mean that's when you need to apply to do an MBA. You need to make sure, okay, you've got a good quality professional experience behind you. Whether that's just the minimum numbers or whether it's, double that, who knows? And that you've got an idea or a clear aspiration, perhaps, about what you want from the MBA. And the last 12 months, I think, safe to say, people have certainly had time on their hands, and therefore they will have been thinking about these things, thinking about the next 5 years in their careers, whether they need an MBA. If they do need an MBA, what type of MBA do you go on to pursue? So yeah, good point there, Matt.
Yeah, David, I guess some of the characteristics, Chris has talked about having, the strong profile that each of the three schools is looking for. Perhaps as you reflect on a class that you brought in what would it be, September 2019, and after the first semester, there they are, campuses closed, and how they needed to adapt. Have you been sort of perhaps proud of qualities that you'd looked for in applicants, resilience, adaptability, however you want to define it, that have then sort of demonstrated themselves, and the way that they have embraced that change and still got the most out of the program?
Yes, for sure, Matt. I think, it was essential that everybody had the right attitude and knew we were in this together, and it was a partnership between the school and the students, really to massively speed up the progress we were making with virtual learning and the future of learning, and necessity is mother invention, etc. So things did come good, but it took it took a lot of discussion to sort of really get to the bottom of what we can offer and what's just impossible because the world has stopped. And I think this is when you're most proud of students who are open-minded and recognize limitations, but then quickly turn it around to how can I make the best of this? How can I take advantage of this? They'll come out of this as one of the COVID classes. That's a talking point in itself, to be able to talk about the way that you still manage to get to know all your classmates or manage to live and breathe experiential learning without physically going around the world on a global business experience to India, whatever it may be. So individuals have stood up, the school I think really stood up. We're all desperately looking forward to normality, but new normal is different. We won't forget what we learn, we'll take advantage of it and build in virtual learning to the right places of our curriculum, and possibly have a broader offering for that experiential learning. Most people want to travel the world for those particular parts of the MBA or other programs, but some would prefer to stay in London, where that was the reason they joined us. So I think it's opened up more opportunities through necessity, but we are looking to the future to start making the most of London and the world for our students to get out there. But yeah, it's been great to see the attitudes, and great to see the change over time. It's even better to see parts of the world returning back to some sense of normality, and finally the progress for the UK.
Yeah. Now we've spoken about the importance of timing. You've also referred, of course, to a competitive market, lots of great options, whether that's different institutions or even the different programs within your institutions. Perhaps beyond timing, it's also a sense of fit, finding the right place for your studies. So perhaps I can ask each of you in turn, because, three wonderful schools, but very complementary, and course length is different, and an approach to the MBA. So starting with you, Stephanie, an individual looking at ESMT Berlin, what do you think are sort of one or two of the characteristics that really make it distinct?
I think what is very distinct in our case is that we have very small classes. So we usually have I think, it's in all the MBA programs. Is it executive MBA part-time, full-time MBA? It's usually not more than 50 to 60 students. So I think that allows for very, very great individual coaching. So you can really concentrate on developing, your leadership and your personal skills. But it also means for students when they apply, and they should keep that in mind, that there is a lot of collaboration. So you will be on spot. You will be closely working together with the classmates in your study groups. So yeah, there's no really a hiding. So you really will engage in the learning totally. What I also think is very unique about the school is that it's Berlin as such. It's a very modern and young city. It has a certain dynamic. There are a lot of startups in the city. So there is a closeness to entrepreneurship and to innovation. And these, of course, also topics that are woven into the MBA curriculum. And you will be definitely, as a student, be exposed to that. The other thing is that since we are a very small school, that also means that there is an excellent student faculty ratio. So it's like 3:1. So that means you do not have to wait long or to follow certain procedures to be in touch with a professor and to discuss things that are close to your heart or you would like to find out more about. I think these would be the key factors that you can expect to have when you come to ESMT.
Great. And for Manchester, obviously a vibrant city I'm very proud of, and a school that's got world-class innovation and research as part of the university. Chris, what do you think often resonates with individuals as they're thinking about the right fit for them and programs? What really stands out in Alliance Manchester?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that one of the ethos, if you will, of Alliance Manchester Business School's MBA programs is something called our Manchester Method. Now, the Manchester Method is a practice-based approach to teaching and learning, and how we demonstrate or implement that on our full-time program is very simply we have a range of live consultancy projects running through the program from day one. So you start with a not-for-profit consultancy, then you go and do a commercial business consultancy, and that's with either generally startups or SMEs, and sometimes we do have some multinational companies, but generally startups, SMEs. And then finally they do an international business consultancy, which is more often than not with your multinationals. And because our program is similarly to David's program at LBS, it's not a 12-month program. So we do have the opportunity to also add an internship into that. So students, when they graduate from the Manchester MBA, they graduate with 4 new companies on their CV, as well as the MBA qualification. So I think in terms of going to your question, what really resonates with people who are attracted to our school and our program, it is that practicality. If someone purely thrives just in a classroom environment because they're academically at the highest level, that's great. On one hand, we'd love to have them on the program, but when you ask things about, is it the right fit? Probably not. The right fit, the Manchester MBA is the right fit for those individuals who want maybe more of a practical program. And then if you switch that to our global MBA program, I think the ability, we have students from exactly 100 countries currently enrolled on that program. And it can be taken from anywhere in the world. And it does have face-to-face elements with our global campuses in Dubai, Hong Kong, Singapore, Shanghai, Sao Paulo. So very much a global business school, and our MBAs, whether they're full-time MBAs or whether they're professional MBA students, they can always draw on our global presence by taking classes. So maybe that's a nice insight to the viewers and listeners.
Do you get a special prize if you're the 100th nationality that joins the program? It feels like there should be sort of confetti or something that gets thrown around. But David, for London Business School, both perhaps what the school is and why you love it, but also what the school is not. Because I'm mindful, sometimes people have either sort of stereotypes or they pigeonhole the school in terms of what they think it is, and then discover, there's so much breadth under the cover.
Yeah, I mean, what we are is a place for people who are curious about global business and the impact they can have on the world. And I think even though with a class size of around 500 on the full-time MBA, the space for every single person to have an impact on the school, let alone when they go out into the world. So our students are ambitious and outgoing, but we expect active participation, and that's what people want to give. So whether that's leadership of an established club or establishing a new club, so the Black in Business Club this year, or very recently the Fly Club, which is the first generation low income club, and perhaps the intersectionality between different groups coming through. So we're seeing that student-led interest in diversity beyond nationalities and industry sector, and the school has got very much together with that in the last year to make that a theme, that diversity goes way beyond the basic factors into true diversity, whether it's neurodiversity or ethnicity, gender, sexuality, as well as where you're from, what company you work for. What we're not, I guess, I have to be careful how I answer this, because I help lead the Masters in Finance program, and we have another MFA program within the school. So we are a finance school, but if you're coming into the MBA, the finance group will be the minority compared to those wanting to go into consulting and tech. So what we are is a good general management MBA program in a school that has a strength in finance and a great strength in strategy and entrepreneurship, et cetera, as well. The thing, I think that's also well-trodden path. So the thing I'd like to say most about what we're not is a first job after graduation factory. If anybody is turning up to focus on nothing but getting into X company, and that's all that really counted, that's not enough for us. We want you to be thinking about how this MBA or Masters in Finance or whatever it may be will impact your career 20 years down the line. Now, of course, you'll become obsessed with the first job during the program, and you'll line up to go through the presentations from McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Amazon, Goldman, all the rest. You'll enter that mentality, but as you come through, you'll see students finding their own path and having a different longer-term focus as well.
Yeah. So yes, the journey that everyone's going on. You also speak to the myriad ways that we can consider diversity. And Stephanie, I mean, perhaps this is one of the wonderful aspects of the work that you love. It's about admissions. It's not about turning people away. It's admitting great candidates. And as you think about beyond professional sectors, they might have had ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. There are so many different ways for you to look at it. So perhaps as anyone is thinking of then applying to ESMT and the wonderful mix, eclectic mix that you achieve in the classroom, what are you looking for in any applicant beyond diversity? David talked about curiosity. What are some of the things that you typically look for?
For us, it's important to have a person with the right fit. What does that mean? In the interview, when I'm talking to people, I'm always thinking, can I see that person at ESMT? Can I see that I meet that person in the hallway, that is a person that would add to the experience of their fellow students? Is the person driven? Is it passionate? Can that person also express clear ideas and fit into the more collaborative nature of that's existing at ESMT? That for me is very important, but I also do focus on, because everyone is doing the MBA for a reason. They do have a clear plan. They want to further progress in their career. And I am really interested in what the expectations of the applicant are. And do I think that ESMT will be able to help that person with the transition that they aspire? And that is also quite important to us, apart from the things that I mentioned earlier. So does that person fit into our values, which are community, curiosity, courage, and rigor? So in a way, I need to see that person in a way fitting into that kind of box. Yeah.
Right. Chris, I'm going to predict for you a 5th year of consecutive growth next year. It's going to be another busy year, I think, just as we look at the numbers, traffic on poets and quants, for top schools like yourselves. So as you think about both the academic rigor, that practical application in the SMEs and the sort of multinationals that you were describing, maybe starting early for the coming year of admissions? What is the advice that you give anyone in the coming months, just how to sort of prepare themselves and start those steps towards putting together a compelling application?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, also an easy question to answer as well, from my perspective. So that one piece of advice that I would always encourage someone, prospective MBA applicants, to listen to is to speak to business schools, contact them directly. All three of our schools and our colleagues from around Europe will have excellent marketing materials that they'll sell the school, they'll sell the MBA program very well. They'll make you want to go to Berlin, or will make you want to go to London Business School. But I'm a big believer, speak directly to admissions representatives at those business schools. And then when you build a relationship with individuals like myself or in my team, and my colleagues, etc., then you'll get that additional information that isn't in the marketing collateral, that isn't on the website. And also that's probably when people will think, you know what, your profile sounds exactly like this MBA students we had from a couple of years ago. Let me put you in contact with him or her. So I would say, yes, research the business schools, research the programs, but then also contact them directly to have a conversation. I said earlier about what resonates with Manchester MBA applicants. We certainly won't say to everyone, yes, all of you should come to Manchester, we're the best. That's not how we speak. If we think that you would excel on a different program to ours, we would say that. But then again, if we think that you would thrive on a practical MBA program like ours, then again, we will clearly say that to a prospective applicant, and also encourage them to then apply. And I think that also should give confidence to MBA applicants when you're speaking with someone directly and they're saying, do you know what, I've got X amount of experience in the industry, I've seen people like you on our program, yes, I would encourage you to apply. Of course, that doesn't mean they're going to get offered a place necessarily, but it's a good starting point, in my opinion. It's a positive conversation to have.
And you mentioned outreach, Chris, and just how important that is. David, the cinemas are opening up, even the inside of the pubs. One of our viewers has written in and said, in terms of on-campus info sessions, but also maybe the point that Chris was making, just those conversations, you talked about student initiatives, clubs that they've started, perhaps an applicant that thinks how they would want to contribute to the LBS community, and speaking to the second-year student that started the energy club or low-income club, whatever it might be, that sort of aligns with their own passions and interests. Yeah,
absolutely. Research is key. There are a lot of students. Most people are pretty approachable. I know some candidates will game it. They know that we care, that you have done research and you've spoken to London Business School people. That's important to us. That word is out there, and so some will do it as a checklist. But I think the depth of that research really comes to light with the way people write essays, but mostly in an interview as well. We want to see research plus passion for the school. So these are all fairly straightforward, obvious answers. One point I wanted to make, though, in terms of thinking about where to go, there's the obvious when, where, and why. The why, do I really want this? Who's advising me to do this? But then also on the where, I'd say aim high. Don't pigeonhole yourself at a certain tier or a certain level. Aim high, but be happy with your choice. It's that combination of, if you want to go for a top 2, top 5 school, go for it. Make sure it's somewhere you think you would belong in terms of what they offer, but don't start guessing who we're interested in. Let us decide that. So find where you think you'd love to go for the right reasons, and make sure you've spoken to people, and then just go for it.
Right. In that assessment, a candidate, Stephanie, can think about the professional experiences that they bring, their undergraduate studies, sort of telling that story. Where do you start? Do you start with an applicant's resume, with their CV? And if so, what is it that you're really trying to identify in dates, places, titles, qualifications that we'll find in there?
That's a jungle, no? So you have, of course, the completed application, you have the CV, and of course, I mean, I do a lot of interviewing. That means the CV for me is a very easy tool to get a first impression. So I really like it if it's short, to the point, and precise. And I have to be honest, I'm very standard here. I really first want to make sure that the core requirements are met. So I, of course, take a look at the work experience. What has that person done? What are the titles? From when to when did that person work? What is the degree? What subject? And then, of course, I start checking, are there some gaps, or is there something where, suddenly a question mark comes into my head, and then I'm going to see whether that's addressed in the application. So I put together a picture. But then I also take a look, is there anything that might be, exciting or not to be expected? Is there, an experience, a competency, a hobby even, that might for me be a good opener for the interview, for example, because I really like it to have a light start, so is there something I can start? And sometimes by, concentrating perhaps a bit on the things that are perhaps not the most important things for a business school representative to ask, they can bring up suddenly turns and interesting topics that give you good access to a person, and perhaps you find out a bit more than you originally expected. But coming back to your question, I'm really conservative in that regard. I really take a look first, are the core requirements met? And then I dive deeper into it.
I would be interested, Chris, to read the CV of Vincent Company that took Manchester's executive MBA. What does it say? World Cup semi-finalists, won every domestic honour that there is going. Maybe those passions at the bottom of the CV, you still need to come up with the right football team, not some Liverpool fan of the 1970s. I suppose beyond the CV, you're then also looking to get the input of an individual that can reflect on perhaps the impact, of the roles, responsibilities that you've had, and recommenders can cause a lot of anxiety for applicants. It might be the right timing for you, but they fear it's not the right timing for their boss. So what is the advice that you give in terms of who to choose and what you're really looking to learn from a recommender?
Yeah, I think with that, it would be, I'm sure responses that many of the listeners will have heard before, but just because they may have heard them before, there's no reason for them not to hear it again because it's right. I think David would answer the question the same, Stephanie would answer the question the same. It's to get recommendations from people you've genuinely worked with, who genuinely know you, not the CEO who, somehow or the other, you could get a reference from the CEO, even though you've not worked with him or her. So a business school seeing, CEO, managing director as a job title, it isn't going to automatically mean, oh, wow, this person must be good. More often than not, we probably know, well, okay, they knew someone to know someone to be able to ask such a favor. So get the references from people who you genuinely have worked with and who genuinely know you. I think that's the key thing. And also the people who you do ask, presumably you'll have spoken to them beforehand. And I don't mean, a week or two before submitting the application. These are people who you might look up to, respect, trust, and you would ask advice from. So therefore they should hopefully, more often than not, know why you're going on to pursue an MBA. And they'll also have that in their mindset as their as they're writing those references.
Right, and given what you were describing, you know, there's both sort of performance and contribution in the classroom, but you will be working in an SME startup, you will be working in a major corporation. So perhaps they could also then reflect on the aptitude, the characteristics that would also see you thrive in that sort of environment.
I mean, absolutely. You know, stepping away from the referral references there, and if I was answering it in a similar mould to what Stephanie said, how she evaluates and looks at applicants or interviews, one of the key things we always look at is what can they benefit, what do they bring to the classroom, how will the other students benefit from that individual being on the program. And we've always got that in our minds. Yes, CV, of course, it's great, it's an easy checkpoint, especially when you see someone's career progression right in front of you. That's great. But yeah, we do try to think, okay, how is that individual going to benefit everyone else in the classroom? What are they bringing to the table?
David, you've encouraged our viewers to aim high and let you, as an admissions team, you know, make decisions about, you know, the suitability of the candidate for the program. Perhaps one other area of anxiety, the story, what was it, 3 weeks ago, the Goldman Sachs employees in the San Francisco office that were complaining that 95-hour weeks were simply too long. Now, I spoke to somebody in the Los Angeles office at Goldman and said, well, they're all soft in San Francisco. So, you know, we've got to toughen them up for 95 hours. But it does then perhaps create anxiety around extracurriculars, you know, community engagement, these other areas. And again, you talked about sort of tick boxes. How can a passion, an interest, just, you know, how you've genuinely committed and engaged and spent your time in the community then resonate with you and your MBA admissions team at LBS?
So I can just sort of preempt that. We're talking about what we're looking for. And I think it's a pyramid. It's academics and test scores and things at the bottom, the facts and the employment history, still facts, and building up to personality and potential. So that's about sort of attitude and potential contributions. And contributions are vital there. But yeah, so just repeat the start of your question, Matt.
In terms of extracurriculars and maybe the anxiety of do I have what the school's looking for? But again, it's your story, your engagement.
Yeah, so coming into that personality section, that's where I was going with this. Carrying on with that beyond the employment history is telling your story. We all insert a section for interests, whether it's in the application or further. This is your chance to tell us truly what you're passionate about. But it's also, I think, one of the areas where people will automatically start writing what they think we want to hear. Or they'll read an article that says, oh, you've got to show team sports, or you've got to show something. Don't do that, because, you know, I also don't want to see reams and lists of things. I want to see something that's concise and personal and just honest. And we're not going to sit and judge whether we think your hobbies are boring. I'm also very mindful that when it comes to extracurricular, yeah, if you are working 90 hours a week, whether it's in Goldman or an admissions office, you're not going to have the chance to do 30 hours a month charity work. So again, that kind of stuff has to be honest. I'm less likely to be impressed there by somebody who I think is obviously sort of shoving stuff in to make us think away. It doesn't get past what makes you you, and that's about your base of academics, employment, and aspirations. So tell the truth, be succinct, and make sure it is a talking point, though, whether it's chess or whether it's an amazing charity initiative. Not saying that chess is the opposite of charity work, but, you know, it put something about you, be authentic.
Yeah, ever since Netflix had the Queen's Gambit, I think we'll be seeing a lot of chess players in the coming years of applications. David has mentioned a pyramid, and my mind turns to Maslow. At the top of Maslow's pyramid, Stephanie, you have the sense of personal fulfillment. Once we've sort of worked our way to that, as you look at those names, the stories on paper, and then they come into the program and this journey that they share with the ESMT over a year, and you know, the personal fulfillment. Do you have any favorite stories or sort of the potential that you saw and how that's then played itself out in the year of the program?
I mean, I'm always amazed when I see people, how they further develop and that they open up sites that you might have not seen before. So of course, how can you see them when you just interview people? But of course, all of us are human beings. We form a certain perception, and then people are on campus, and then they turn out to be extremely interested in the school, in what we're doing, and very supportive. I have in my mind, there were some students in the past, and there always will be, I think, who take such an interest in what we're doing and really like to support us and really want to make sure that we can continue recruiting people that they do also see fit with ESMT and support us with being there for us, helping us out, organizing themselves events, reaching out to people themselves. So I see a lot of action in that regard. And that is something that really moves me and that I really like. And that, yeah, of course, you can say, shouldn't admissions ask people for help? Of course, in a way we do that, of course, but I really like it how, yeah, I think that's what I like, how the school and the staff and the students in a way grow together. Okay, COVID might have an impact on that. This might not be so much in a face-to-face version, but I think it's definitely there. And that is something I really like to see, how students turn out to be, why they are at ESMT. Yeah.
And that's in the time of the program, Chris. Once you've graduated, you know, the school continues to be such a big part of your life. Talk a little bit about, you know, becoming an ambassador of the school, but, you know, the alumni network, when you've got 100 nationalities coming into the program, you know, realistically, what does that mean, and how does that continue to contribute to your personal and professional development and growth to be part of this fantastic network?
Again, very good question, Matt. And that's a question that we, for a number of years, have asked ourselves internally. And over the last couple of years, we came up with an answer, or maybe a solution, if you will, to the debate about, you know, lifelong learning is something that's spoken about a lot in the industry, and rightfully so. But you're sat there with one of the top MBA programs thinking, well, okay, what does that mean for our alumni? So one of the initiatives that we recently launched was, whether you come on our full-time MBA or one of our online MBAs, you would be invited back when you graduate to undertake an elective free of charge. We've always sold electives individually for any alumni who, you know, may or may not wanted to come on to learn an additional new topic. But we thought, well, this is a good foray, if you will, into that idea of lifelong learning. I don't think this means that's the end of it for us. It's just our first initiative. And we as a school certainly value our alumni network. When I look at the projects on our full-time MBA, many of them come from our alumni who've, you know, whether they're 2 years after graduating from the program or 20 years when they've graduated, they know the value and they know the quality of the students that we recruit at Alliance Manchester Business School, and they think, yes, let's have 4, 5, 6 of them working on entry into a new, I don't know, African market, for example. And the other thing, we're fortunate because of our global presence with regards to our alumni as well. So we do have staff in all those locations. So before COVID, if we look at, you know, our Hong Kong annual alumni event, we've got about 350 people that attend that event every year, and that's replicated across all our global campuses and elsewhere.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource, and this, you know, community that you continue to belong to give to. So it's really just the start of the journey. David, I was hoping to follow in the tradition of Paul McCartney and David Bowie and get married at the Marylebone Town Hall just across the road. I couldn't because, of course, LBS had taken over the space, and you've created an incubator, this launch pad. As I think about alumni, it's always interesting how many alumni not immediately become entrepreneurs, perhaps in the 5, 10 years. How do you think, you talked about not just focusing on the first job coming out of school, how do you think that the business school then provides the building blocks for that next venture and the entrepreneurial person inside of you?
You can still get married there, Matt. It's still available for weddings. We've got this small section of the building that's still owned by the council for that. So it's really intriguing, making your way to a meeting on budgets, walking past someone's wedding. So that was alumni vital. First of all, I wanted to say that, you know, alumni more than important, more than critical. They are the school. In admissions, we're recruiting alumni. That's what we're doing, recruiting future alumni who are just happen to be called students. So I think if you put that at the base of what you're doing in terms of we're doing things long term as well. Yeah, back to your question, alumni, whether they want to initially or not, eventually, many of them, I wish I knew the percentage, that must be out there somewhere, but so many will do their own thing later on in their career, whether it's immediately 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, a lot depends on whether you're paying off debt, I suppose, as well. But how to prepare is about training, connections, network. So it's about having the skills, being around people who have done it. So you can do the entrepreneurship summer school, London Business School, and not necessarily start a business straight away. It's more likely to be you'll be in touch with classmates who are entrepreneurs, and you'll attend events. You'll spend a lot of time thinking about that for the future. You know, that really is good preparation. But when it comes to actually doing it, I think you've worked part of your career. You understand that entrepreneurship is about looking for opportunities and gaps. You know, what's missing from the world, and then what experience do I have, what resources do I have, what networks do I have, and all of those come from good business education and a good institution with good networks around the world.
Yeah, so with that investment, and as we emerge from 15 months of a pandemic, people that are looking for change, looking to create new opportunities. So Stephanie, when you talk with individuals, there's that leap of faith. It's a big investment in time. It's a big investment in money. How do you sort of share your perspectives on the return that they're going to get from making that investment?
So most of the students students at ESMT, they are pretty much interested in working in Germany. So 80 to 90% usually do stay. So usually it is kind of realistic that what they aspire can be achieved. So we just advise them what to do. We have a very dedicated career services department helping out in that regard. But when I have the feeling in admissions, for example, that what people aspire is not going to fly, I will be very clear about it. Yeah. So if I have the feeling someone comes perhaps even how people are going to finance it. You are in contact with them. If you have the feeling, oops, that might be a high risk, you have to be quite open and say, look, I do not really see that that's going to work out, and you need to point out the risks involved. Yeah. So because part of the interview is always like, what do you aspire to do? How do you plan to go there? What are your expectations? Financing is always a question and an issue. Yeah, I know it's a very general answer. Sorry for that, but that is how we usually deal with that.
Yeah, and I mean, Chris, with the points that Stephanie has made, there are many different options, ways of then getting that business education at Alliance Manchester. What strikes you in terms of return? Not even just the salary issue. We see in the FT the sort of progress that all of your graduates make, but maybe some of the intangibles, issues of what personal confidence that you emerge with out of the program. How do you sort of capture or share some of those benefits that they're going to gain?
Yeah, so when we take a step back from your traditional things about salary remuneration, about maybe changing industry, changing location, changing job function, which of course they're all very, very important, but I think everyone who's listening in today, I think probably already knows that. But when you talk about those intangible things, Matt, you've already said the key word that I hear time and time again when we have students or alumni helping us out, whether it be face-to-face events or online events, and it's that word confidence. And by confidence, I don't mean sitting on a Zoom or delivering a presentation and not being nervous. That's not what I mean. By confidence, I mean someone who may not have a financial background. They're never going to be the CFO of an organization. They're never going to be the management accountant, the person who's inputting the numbers, but that they'd have the confidence of being in a room with finance individuals, and that they would be able to A, speak their language, B, they would be able to bring their own ideas there in terms of trying to influence that strategy. And that's the type of, I don't know whether you would call it intangible or tangible, but the word confidence absolutely comes up time and time again. And I'd actually go as far to say I hear it from all MBA students. That's not just a Manchester MBA thing.
Right. David, one point I should clear up. I thought that you did your budget meetings in the Windsor pub, so there was no need to walk past any weddings taking place in the town hall across the road. This issue of confidence, and Chris speaks to it really, really well. The first day of term, you've gone past the pub, you're at the entrance to the school, and maybe some anxiety in terms of what we often describe as imposter syndrome. Did David's team make a mistake? Am I good enough to be here? And perhaps just a final few words for us to close this session on, putting those thoughts aside, because again, you're doing your job to identify great talent.
Sorry, what sort of question?
There's never really a clear question from me, is there?
No,
There's a bit of a statement that I rely on you to pick up on. So it's this idea of imposter syndrome and the anxiety of maybe they made a mistake, and I'm not the right person for this program. How would you get people to sort of move beyond that apprehension?
I'm so glad you asked that. I think this is a really fascinating subject and a really important one. I think it's a scale, isn't it? You've got people with imposter syndrome right through to overconfidence. And I know where I'd want people to be starting the program. It's down towards the imposter syndrome end of, because you can help build people up and they can gain that confidence very quickly. But perhaps it's harder to get people to reflect and realize that they're not the best in the world, and actually they've got a lot to learn from others. So I think it's just about having a very open community who care about each other, who are interested in each other. We will help you to recognize that once you're there, you belong. But I think it's becoming increasingly important as we do look to recruit people from diverse backgrounds. It's not huge, but as we are able to help people into the program who never thought they'd have the funding to do so, which we're trying to do more and more of, or perhaps they didn't fit exactly that. And this is a stated aim of London Business School, is to try and do this and try and look for talent wherever it comes from, and whatever resources they have. So it's a core part of what we're trying to do, even if it's a relatively small base to build upon. But yeah, humility is so important, I think, and recognition that other people can be right, and you're there to learn from others. So if we've done our job correctly, it's not about whether they come in with confidence or no confidence. It's about whether they come in reflective enough to recognize that they need to listen to others and learn from others.
Yeah, well, you three are the gatekeepers of three world-class business schools, and you bring your own level of humility. I also appreciate the level of candor, Stephanie, that in terms of the discussions you have with candidates. Chris, just that you sort of talk about, is this the right place? You know, we'll say one way or another, and the sort of confidence and courage that you inspire in people, David, to take that next step. Of course, we have many participants that would now like to speak to each of you in the chat rooms. I think we've got separate links for you to then engage with all of them. This is just the first of today's panels at the CentreCourt MBA Festival. We hope that an audience will be back in an hour for career services directors of other top European business schools, and then later through the day with schools from the US. And all of this, of course, you might even be watching on YouTube. These have had tens of thousands of views on YouTube, but however you've chosen to join us for today's festival, we're delighted to have had you with us, and my very personal thanks to Stephanie, to Chris, and to David. Thank you to all three of you.